All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, a very intriguing, important, and what could possibly be a very tragic story has been brought to my attention over the last few months. Some of you may have heard of the David O. McKay mural at BYU, Hawaii. Apparently, it is on the chopping block, and the reasons behind it seem to be somewhat suspect, as corroborated by many both on campus and off campus. Now, it's important to know that there's been a plan over the last several years for BYU Hawaii to expand, to bring in more residential housing so that and then expand on the number of students that are there. So there is some change that is there. However, the plans that have been submitted for this expansion include the destruction of the David O. McKay mural. Now, keep in mind that for the Hawaiian people and many of the Polynesian people, where the church is very strong, the David O. McKay mural acts as an icon for a big part of their spiritual and church heritage. It's very similar to those in Salt Lake, for example, and beyond, that look at the This Is the Place monument and understand what that heritage is with the pioneers and the trek coming across the plains. Well, for the Hawaiians and Polynesians, this is the same type of thing. They don't have as much of a connection, obviously, to the This Is the Place monument. They understand it, but the David O. McKay mural really is that icon for them, and it appears by many reports, actually, that this mural may be destroyed as soon as June of this year. Now, I do think it's important to understand that I did make a request to BYU Hawaii, to two different officials, to answer a few questions. One of those questions had to do with the cost of removing the mural or to preserve the mural. Those dollar figures were not divulged, and I was simply directed to a website or a web page on the BYU Hawaii website that seems to have an outward-facing explanation of what is going on. But even that is very suspect. On the webpage, it says that the plans to move forward and to remove the mural have already been approved by the board of directors. And yet, in a meeting just 2 weeks ago, a very high-level administrator spoke to the Laie community, this is the town where BYU Hawaii is, and told them that there is no set plans. But as you can see here on the website, it says that it's already been approved. There's been a lot of confusion coming out of the communications that come out of BYU Hawaii, and very, very little communication to the local community there in Laie or to Hawaii more broadly. Now, many people in Hawaii and beyond don't know that this is even on the chopping block. This podcast is to make you aware of what is going on and what seems very strange about it. There have been donors who have offered the money to preserve the mural, but none of that has ever been taken into consideration in the architectural plans. And there seems to be political motivation behind this. Now, I've spoken with several individuals on campus. I have spoken with several students. I have spoken with several members of the Laie community who have received little to no communication on what is going on, who have received very little communication or answers to their questions. I've brought a few of them on here to be interviewed so that you can hear firsthand the legacy, the history, the heritage that this mural represents for them. Now, the two individuals that you're going to hear from first are Verla Moore and Frank De La Rosa. Verla is the president of the Laie Community Association, and Frank has been around for a while. You're going to love what he has to say about this. This is a story with real meaning and a lack of response from those in control. All right, so I'm here with Verla Moore. She is the president of the Laie Community Association. Verla, I understand your family's been there for a couple hundred years. Is that right?
That's correct.
Why do you think that there hasn't been more of an involvement from BYU Hawaii to the community there?
Because of the emotions. It's an emotional topic. And when you deal with emotions, especially in this close-knit community, things get a little loud.
Why is it such an emotional topic?
It's an emotional topic. And you know what? I want to defer Frank Della Rosa on this, because he knows why. He's the one who called me and said, Verla, you guys got to stop this. So I defer to Frank Della Rosa. Frank, why is it an emotional topic?
Let me go back a little ways, because my family is not the original families, and if you understand the context of how Laie came to be, then my family is part of that migratory group that came from the islands to Laie for the purpose of attending the temple and to assist in the building of the temple. Yeah, we have no long-time roots in Laie, other than the fact that when the temple was started and the saints in the South Pacific had no access to any temple, they were encouraged to migrate to Laie as the gathering place. In that context, we have a direct purpose on why we do not want that mural destroyed, because it is our legacy. The other thing you have to realize, as members of this church, we don't per se have that connection to the saints that were converted from Scandinavia or England and came across the plains to this is the place. There's no emotional connection with us, but we go along with that because that's how we grew up.
Sure.
The saints, the pioneers. Our legacy goes to that mural. Our pioneer heritage goes to the islands we came from. That's where our pioneer heritage, all the way up until Isepa. See, I have family buried in Isepa. There were not only Hawaiians, there were Samoan families there in Isepa. So that's our heritage. And yet we're only told about the pioneers that crossed the Great Plains. And then our kids go to this trek experience. Nothing about our trek from the islands to Salt Lake via Laie, but we're being taught the trek from these areas with the hand carts to this is the place monument.
What would it mean to lose the mural?
That's our identity. That's us. That's our pioneer heritage. If they understand the sacrifice that Brother Bo and his son, who pieced together that mural, then they understand the sacrifices of our families that came to Laie. That mural was not completed until an hour to when they dedicated Church College of Hawaii. That mural was worked on until it was completed, just before the dedication. That's some kind of sacrifice.
Verla, now, I don't know about Frank, if you did, but Verla, did you have family that were present at that flag raising ceremony?
Absolutely. Well, it was 1963, right? So, and prior to that, absolutely. My mom then, the dedication, now families for that, let's go back a little bit. When Frank talked about Isepa, I want to make sure you understand that our saints, some of our Polynesian saints, were taken from here and told to go to Utah so that they could do their endowments. Do you know about that?
No.
So they ended up in Skull Valley. And some people look at it, wow, they stuck our people out in the desert and everything. But what happened was I think Riley said there's about 4 Hawaiians and 2 Caucasians who actually served their mission here. And they looked for a plot of land that our Hawaiians would be comfortable in because, we're brown skinned, we're separate. They wanted them to be comfortable. So they found this place out called Skull Valley. And that's where the saints from Laie traveled up there. And they called them Isepa. So when President Joseph Fielding Smith was there, they did their endowments and everything. And he told the people, he says, I'm not going to be around forever to protect you, to do the things that need to be done, because he had a huge love for the Polynesians. And then he encouraged them to go back home. Some of these kids born there in Skull Valley are depicted on that mural. That's the faith of these saints. That's why it means a lot to us. That's the connection. So when you see these families depicted in there, and then you just say, well, we're going to tell a storyline. Well, that picture, that mosaic is a factual depiction. You can't mimic that. You can't redesign something. You weren't there. It captured everything. And that's why it gets emotional. Families now, generations back, says, hey, my great-great-grandparents went to Utah, did what the prophet told them to do, did what they were supposed to do, came back here, and that's what's on that mirror. So when they come home and they look at this and they read that and they explain that, that's the emotional tie. To take that away, well, let's go take down the statue by This Is the Place. All right, this is our place. That's what it means to us. That's the emotional piece behind that.
Yeah, interesting. I can hear it in your voice. So what can be done? What can be done to stop this? Here's a question I have, because I know that BYU, I've contacted BYU Hawaii, and I didn't get any answers. They sent me to a webpage, and there's no cost that's given on this, how much it's going to cost, which is kind of interesting, because if we knew a cost, who knows? I mean, maybe donors would come in and say, hey, I don't want this gone. We can gather a bunch of donors, and whatever it's going to cost to preserve it, we're going to preserve it. And yet this doesn't even seem to be an option.
They gave us a cost at one time. When we went in there and sat down, they said it's going to cost about $10 million to preserve it in its entirety.
$10 million.
I asked the question, and I haven't gotten an answer. So if we find the donors that donate to BYU Hawaii all around the world, because we've got a lot of successful people who went through the gates here, if we find the donors, would you preserve that mural? And it's going to answer two questions. Either money is at root to this problem, or the issue is something else.
What is the other? What else could it be?
Well, the website says it's not political, but you know, the rumor mill here and what we hear from campus people who have actually been to the thing is, it's got something to do with colonialism.
Well, this is something very. I mean, I've talked to people on campus. I have talked to students. I have talked to people off campus, in the community, and I've heard the same thing, right? They're telling me the same thing, that they have heard some members of the administration talk about white supremacy and colonization and racism, even, that is somehow associated with this mural, and it just seems to me like it's diametrically opposed to what the community says about this.
It's an excuse they're using to justify. Because that's the going thing now, right? In society, the woke society now. Why bring it into the church? That's political. They're making this political. It's not us, not the descendants of these pioneers. There's no politicalness in this. That's what's so mind-boggling, is that this is a heritage that we live. And this is a heritage we want to keep alive. Why not? $10 million when you can jack up the Salt Lake Temple and redo the foundation, and this little mural costs $10 million to preserve? Something wrong.
To take offense to something that's so silly, and it's our history. The American flag was part of our history. Those people who lived during those eras, I know my mom then, my dad then, they're very patriotic. So we have this generation now that might not be so patriotic. I know both myself and Frank served in the military. We feel a little differently. I don't feel like we should be tearing down something because it offends us now. Something from the past that offends us now has no standing. That mural represents the very reason that school is here. President, at the time it was Elder McKay, saw these kids over there at the school at a flag raising ceremony, which both Frank and I I went to school in the 1960s with both Frank and I. We always stood by the flagpole. We said the Pledge of Allegiance every day. We raised the flag and lowered the flag. So we can all relate to that. Even to this day, they do the same thing in Laie school. So what's wrong with that? And that's what he saw. When he saw that, he foresaw a school here. When he came back as the prophet and we dedicated this school, what's wrong with that? We can accept the school today. It's helped a lot of us. It's helped this community grow, 4 times. I said, you can go to every house down here practically. We have a bachelor's degree. Every other house, you probably have a master's degree. So it's benefited this community. Nobody's complaining about that, but you have an administration that would like to come in and pretend none of that happened because they're not from here. They're not rooted here. They don't know this. They come in, maybe they've been tasked, hey, put up these buildings and everything, but you need to preserve the past. You have to preserve the past in order for us to go into the future. We have to have that link. That's the way Polynesians work. The past, the values, that's what brings us here. How do we improve on that? But, that mural is the link to our past. You take that down, where do we start? Does 2023 become our new past? I don't think so. There's nothing else in this area to depict and connect us to the past. There's nothing here. That's it.
Do most of the members of the community in Laie, do they know that the plans are to remove the mural?
No.
We don't know what they know because there's never been a meeting. So we're going to have something next week, Tuesday, and that was just to, bring people up. A lot of these young people don't really know the history of that. But that might come up in next Tuesday's meeting, but no.
So if the community doesn't know in Laie, then Hawaiians more broadly don't know about this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what do you think the reaction would be if all of a sudden, the members of the church in Hawaii all heard, hey, that mural's coming down?
Well, we've already heard some of it. They've signed petitions and sent it in, but where does it go? Original members of the Church College of Hawaii have signed those petitions, says you got to keep this. But everything we do so far, it really has fallen on deaf ears. And it's because, I talk about the link to the past, but we don't even have a link to Utah. That's the problem.
Yeah.
We don't have a direct link to Utah. That becomes a big problem. So who's speaking for the community? I don't know.
Your link basically is through the administration of BYU Hawaii.
Absolutely, right? And you're going to pray for them to tell your story. How can they be as passionate about our story if none of them are from here? Not one.
I think what's important to understand, Greg, is that we don't want to make this turn it into some kind of radical movement because we're all members. We all follow the tenets of the LDS Church. What we want to ensure is that our past is not erased, that our generations to follow know where we came from. We didn't come from England, Scandinavia. We came from the various islands of the Pacific. Laie was the point of gathering, and then we branched out from there. Laie was the gathering place where Polynesians entered the U.S. and are now all over the continental U.S. because of this church. To move this church, to grow this church. It's not that we're against the LDS Church. No.
Sure.
We have a history too. We have a pioneer history that should be preserved and should be celebrated, not hide behind the pioneers with the cart wagons. We respect that, but we have no ties to that. No emotional, no political ties, no family ties to those stalwart Mormons that, braved the winters and whatever. We had other things. Our people were thrown in fire pits when they joined the church, so they gravitated to where members are, and the ultimate was Laie. That's where we connect to. So, whether it's political or not, you can't take the politics out of this because there's somebody going to oppose. And I go back to prayers in schools, right? What happened? what happened when these minority groups came in and says, why should we follow Christianity? My kids don't pray. And this is the same thing.
Yeah.
White people coming to Hawaii. So what? The Queen joined the church. The Queen traveled to Salt Lake City for her endowment. Have we heard anything that, from during Pioneer Day? Oh, yeah, Queen of Hawaii. She was a member. What royalty ever joined the church? You see? So there's a big history here, a rich history with Polynesian to recognize what we accomplishing, what we're still accomplishing.
Yeah.
I think the sentiments from whoever's doing this project are messed up. They've lost the emotional idea of who we are. And it seems like they're trying to erase that idea. Oh, yeah, we'll take a portion. Oh, yeah, we'll just paint another mural, but a smaller one. But that new mural, it doesn't reflect the sacrifices of the original people who put that mural together, who sacrificed that entire night and morning with their vehicles pointing lights towards that edifice just so they can complete it the next morning. Talk about those sacrifices. People worked on the building of church college and PCC for free. Nobody got paid. We sacrificed. We went and collected the leaves from the cane fields. Our old people, my grandma, went in the cane fields and collected leaves to thatch the roofs. They weaved it because no person from US of A knew how to build an authentic Polynesian house. They relied on our families for free. No one got paid except those who came to manage and direct the building. But none of our people got paid. They didn't even feed our people. They never brought water. That was all done by our families. So that kind of sacrifice cannot be erased. We have to maintain that. So our kids and generations to follow know how Laie was built, how they got here, and how they're here now in Utah and just about every state in the union. So that kind of empathy was left out of this decision because you're not from here and you don't understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, none of the administration is from there.
None. So that's where we're coming from. Why we're changing this now. Why we're trying to erase our legacy. That's hard to accept.
And then we finish off with a couple comments from John Lingwall. John is the grandson of Errol Bowe, who worked on the mural. And John today probably knows more about that mural than anybody else does. And here's the thing. 10 years ago, he gave a proposal, a bid, to do the wall, preserve it, for a lot less than $10 million. There may be no one who knows that mural inside and out more than John Lingwall, and yet he's barely been consulted on any of this. What about the idea of, because I've heard from some places that it's deteriorating, right? It's deteriorating, and so something has to be done, and so they're going to remove it, maybe save a couple of pieces, put it to the inside of the new building they're going to build.
I've been on that mural. I've had my hands on that mural. I've looked at just every square inch over the past decade. There was nothing wrong with it. There wasn't one crack in that mural on anything that you can see. And that thing's been up for 70 years. I mean, the thing was installed with knowledge for future generations, many future generations. And we're not even at the halfway point. It started developing cracks right along the two front columns there, right at the time when they were building the new cafeteria. I know that mural more intimately than I think anybody in Hawaii. That mural is a keystone for every soul that comes right down that front drive. That's the first thing that they see. When most immigrants come to this country, that's the first thing that they want to see, United States flag. But apparently it's in the way.
So do you know of anyone, do you know if this has been put out to see if any donors would provide money to try and save the mural?
Oh, yeah. I didn't have to dig too deep either. I mean, I did not have to dig. In fact, one of the board members, he did some investigation on his own, and he got upwards of $15 million. And he says, if you need double that, that's not a problem. Just let him know. That was by several donors. But I also know somebody, a single donor, who would probably donate the whole thing. But here's my confusion, is I understand that there's been bids, actually a single bid, for $10 million. I'm really curious as to find out why it cost $10 million for that mural. Now, are we talking the relocation of it? Are we talking about restoring it? Keep in mind that I've given a proposal about 10 years ago now to BYU to restore it. And it's not even nowhere near that.
In any of your discussion with BYU Hawaii, have you discussed the option of donors helping out with this?
I haven't received any invites to come back to speak of the donors that were found. It's my understanding from Verla that she collected information from somebody at the church saying that they will not receive any outside donations that go towards a specific project authorized by the church. It needs to be donated to the church, and they will then fund it accordingly.
Yeah, tell me again. Tell me again specifically your family's relationship to the mural.
Harold Bowe was my grandfather, and he was called as an early missionary with his wife Sylvia, and his labor mission was to head all of the masonry department for Church College back in those days. We know it as BYU, but he was a labor missionary. And one of those tasks was to erect this mural right there in the front. I'm extremely passionate on this, and there's a reason why BYU will never invite me of a professional tile person's opinion on the mural. It's because I know too much about it. I know the porosity of the material that's up there now, how the whole thing was erected in its time slice, what needs to be done properly to restore it correctly. They don't want to even entertain any of those ideas. Again, this is a pure political scheme that they want. And it is. I've heard it. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I've got friends, colleagues who can all testify to this. I'd like to end with kind of my personal testimony in regards to the mural, if you wouldn't mind. When this mural went up 70 plus years ago, the video of my uncle was true and correct. And I will stand by. There's a reason why God had his hands involved in the erection of that mural. I would offer myself, and many of my colleagues know, that I would gladly restore that mural free of charge. And I have already given my proposal to President Tanner and Norman Black. And those guys you can research. The church can pay for all the materials if they really want to have their hand in. But yeah, it was a labor of love going up. It needs to be a labor of love to be restored.
We can all agree that we want to see BYU, Hawaii, Provo, Idaho all succeed and move forward. But after speaking with so many individuals there at the school and in the community, and more broadly throughout Hawaii, it's obvious that this mural is crucial to preserve. It's my hope that this story can end positively, and this link to the heritage and history and spiritual connection that Polynesians have with the mural and the gathering place of Laie can hold on to its meaning through holding on to the mural. Thanks for listening.